The Aegis system was not designed to fight two wars at once. It was designed to fight one war extremely well, the SPY-6 tracking hundreds of contacts, the fire control system managing dozens of engagement solutions in parallel, the VLS ripple firing at a tempo no human crew could match. The engagement capacity was sufficient against any single threat category the adversary was likely to field. The word that mattered in that sentence was single. The destroyer is operating in the Gulf of Aden, 180 nautical miles south of the Yemeni coast, 220 nautical miles east of Djibouti. The ship is part of a multinational task force conducting freedom of navigation operations in the corridor that connects the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. The corridor has been contested for 11 months. The task force has conducted 14 separate engagements in that period. 14 engagements, 14 tactical victories, 14 after-action reports with the same strategic conclusion. The adversary was learning faster than the defense was adapting. At 9:17 a.m., two separate radar events occurred within 4 seconds of each other. The first, a ballistic missile launch signature detected by the ship's AN/SPY-6 and simultaneously confirmed by the space-based infrared sensor network. A boost phase plume from a launch site 34 kilometers northeast of Sana'a, consistent with a Burkan 2H medium-range ballistic missile. The Burkan 2H was a modified Scud derivative with an estimated range of 1,200 kilometers and a terminal velocity approaching Mach 5 in the reentry phase. At the assessed launch point, the missile's computed impact solution placed the ship within the terminal footprint at a time of flight of approximately 7 minutes 40 seconds. 7 minutes and 40 seconds. The second, 20 contacts, airborne, emerging from a coastal launch area 290 kilometers north-northeast, consistent with Shahed-136 fixed-wing one-way attack, UAVs, GPS and terminal electro-optical guidance, 40-kilogram fragmentation warheads, speed 190 kilometers per hour, altitude 600 meters and climbing, bearing direct approach, time to SM-6 engagement range approximately 18 minutes, 4 seconds between detections. The fire control system generated 2 engagement solutions in 0.4 seconds. First, allocate SM-6 in BMD mode against the ballistic threat before reentry. 4 SM-6 in BMD provided 96% intercept probability. The system recommended 4 cells BMD, 4 cells AAW reserve. 4 SM-6 against 20 UAVs at 75% hit rate, 12 contacts neutralized at outer ring, 8 surviving to the middle ring. Manageable with SM-2 and ESSM. The second solution noted a timing gap. The Burkan's terminal phase would arrive in 7 minutes 40 seconds. The UAVs would reach SM-6 AAW range in 18 minutes. The BMD engagement would complete before the UAV outer ring opened. The fire control system assessed the dual engagement as sequentially feasible. The TAO read both solutions. Then he looked at something the fire control system had not flagged as a conflict because it was not, technically, an equipment limitation. It was a doctrine gap. The Burkan 2H in terminal phase performed a re-entry maneuver. Every intercepted Burkan variant in the engagement record had required a second SM-6 round when the first proximity detonation failed to achieve structural breakup, the warhead section separating and continuing on a ballistic arc. A partial intercept still delivered ordnance on or near the target. Doctrine called for a fire-assess-fire sequence. First SM-6 fires, result assessed, second SM-6 fires if the first was incomplete. The sequence required 4 to 6 seconds between launches. In a clean BMD engagement with no other threats, the sequence was standard. Against a Birkin 2H with a simultaneous UAV engagement occupying the fire control radar's tracking capacity, the look phase of fire assess fire was competing for radar attention with 20 UAV track files. If the fire control radar was managing 20 UAV approach tracks simultaneously, its update rate on the post-intercept Birkin debris field would degrade. The assessment of whether the primary intercept had achieved structural breakup, the critical decision point for the fire assess fire sequence, would take longer. That delay was measured in seconds. The warhead section of a Birkin 2H at terminal velocity covered approximately 4 kilometers per second. Seconds mattered. Running count, 9:19 a.m., second 130. Birkin 2H, 5 minutes 30 seconds to terminal phase. UAV contacts, 20 at 278 kilometers, 16 minutes to SM-6 AAW range. SM-6, 8 available, allocation pending. SM-2, 24. ESSM, 32. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100%. Fire control radar, transitioning to BMD mode. Cost, $0. How many seconds between primary Birkin intercept and warhead section impact if the primary miss? The TAO asked. The answer came in 8 seconds from the combat systems coordinator. Assessed warhead section terminal phase. 11 to 14 seconds from a primary intercept point to impact footprint, depending on intercept altitude. 11 seconds. If the first SM-6 achieved proximity detonation on the Birkin body but the warhead section separated and continued, and the fire control radar was managing a 20-contact UAV track picture simultaneously, the window for the second SM-6 was 11 seconds with radar attention divided. The fire control system's engagement solution had not flagged this as a problem because the system processed radar resources as a scheduling function, not a cognitive load. The system could technically schedule both tasks. The question was not whether it could schedule them. The question was whether the scheduling produced the intercept quality required to guarantee a Mach 5 warhead section did not reach the hull. The TAO made the call in 41 seconds. 6 SM, 6 BMD. Fire assess fire on the Birkin with a full dedicated radar picture. 2 SM-6 reserved AAW. SM-2 takes the UAV outer ring. ESSM on standby. RAM standby. I want 0 radar sharing between the BMD engagement and anything else until the Birkin warhead section is confirmed, neutralized, or has impacted. 6 SM-6 in BMD mode left 2 SM-6 for AAW. 2 SM-6 against 20 UAVs at the outer ring, 1.5 contacts per cell at 75% hit rate. 3 contacts neutralized at outer ring. 17 UAVs surviving to the middle ring. The SM-2 and ESSM would carry the full UAV engagement. He was betting 6 SM-6 and a degraded UAV outer ring on a clean Birkin intercept, and betting that whoever had designed this engagement had run the same numbers and was counting on exactly this dilemma. Running count, 9:17 a.m., second 41. Ballistic contact, Birkin, 2H 7 minutes, 22 seconds to terminal phase. UAV contacts, 20 at 290 kilometers, 18 minutes to SM-6 range. SM-6, 6 allocated BMD, 2 reserved AAW. SM-2, 24 loaded. ESSM, 32 loaded. RAM, 21. CIWS, 100% both mounts. Cost, $0. Radar, dedicated BMD track mode initiating. The 6 SM-6 cells in BMD mode required the SPY-6 to transition to a high-elevation radar geometry for the exo-atmospheric intercept. During this phase, track quality on low-altitude UAV contacts degraded, update rate dropping from the standard 4-second cycle to 7 seconds as the system prioritized the BMD elevation band. The UAV contacts continued closing at 190 kilometers per hour through a slightly blurred defensive picture. At 9:22 a.m., 4 minutes and 43 seconds after first detection, the Burkhan 2H reached the mid-course apogee at approximately 90 kilometers altitude and began its terminal phase descent. At this moment, the first two SM-6 in BMD mode were already in flight, having been launched at 9:20 a.m. in the standard mid-course engagement window. The remaining four SM-6 in BMD mode were allocated to fire assess fire follow-up. The first SM-6 intercepted the Burkhan body at 9:23 a.m. at an altitude of 42 kilometers, 112 kilometers from the ship. The proximity detonation was confirmed by the radar signature change, the primary missile body producing a debris cloud consistent with structural fragmentation. Standard intercept result. However, the radar assessment of warhead section separation took 9 seconds rather than the standard 4. The SPY-6 update rate on the debris field was competing with a simultaneous update cycle on 20 UAV contacts, now at 198 kilometers, and beginning to produce stable track files. In those 9 seconds, the warhead section descended from 42 kilometers to 6 kilometers altitude. The second SM-6 in the fire assess fire sequence launched at 9:23 a.m. against the warhead section at 6 kilometers altitude. The engagement geometry was non-optimal. The warhead section was at low altitude, high velocity, small radar cross-section, and the intercept solution had been computed in a 9-second window rather than the standard 4-second window. The SM-6 proximity detonation occurred at 3.1 kilometers altitude, 47 kilometers from the ship. Fragmentation pattern assessment. Warhead section, structural integrity, degraded but not confirmed neutralized. Debris field continuing on ballistic trajectory. Third SM-6 launched at 9:23 a.m. Terminal engagement against debris field at 1.8 kilometers altitude, 31 kilometers from ship. Proximity detonation. Debris field assessed as fully neutralized, no coherent warhead section, maintaining ballistic trajectory. The Burkhan 2H engagement was complete. 3 SM-6 expended on the Burkhan body and 2 follow-up intercepts. 3 SM-6 remaining in BMD mode had not been needed. The third round had achieved neutralization. Total SM-6 expended on BMD, 3 cells. Total SM-6 remaining, 5. 2 of those 5 were the AAW reserve. 3 were still allocated BMD but no longer needed. Running count, 9:23 a.m., second 380. Burkhan 2H, 3 SM-6 expended. Warhead section neutralized at 31 kilometers. UAV contacts, 20 at 169 kilometers. 10 minutes to SM-6 AAW range. SM-6 5 remaining, reallocating to AAW. SM-2 24. ESSM 32. RAM 21. CIWS 100%. Radar returning to full AAW mode. Cost $6.3 million. The TAO reallocated immediately. Transition all remaining SM-6 to AAW. 5 cells available at 9:23 a.m., 6 minutes and 3 seconds into the engagement. The UAV contacts were at 168 kilometers, 11 minutes from SM-6 AAW engagement range. The BMD fight was over. The AAW fight had not yet begun. 5 SM-6 available for the outer ring. The math had shifted from 2 SM-6 against 20 UAVs to 5 SM-6 against 20 UAVs. Still tighter than doctrine preferred, but the outer ring was no longer a near-miss equation. Running count 9:24 a.m., second 426, Burkhan 2H neutralized, 3 SM-6 expended BMD, SM-6 AAW available 5, UAV contacts 20 at 163 kilometers, 10 minutes to SM-6 AAW range, SM-2 24, ESSM-32, RAM-21, CIWS 100%, cost expended $6.3 million, radar returning to full AAW mode. The SPY-6 transitioned from BMD geometry back to full AAW track mode over the next 90 seconds. The UAV track files sharpened as the update cycle returned to the standard 4-second interval. 20 contacts bearing 005, range 157 kilometers, altitude now 500 meters, and descending slightly. Speed still 190 kilometers per hour, formation spacing approximately 200 meters between platforms. The FLIR operator flagged the first anomaly. 2 contacts on the southern formation edge at bearings 359 and 002 were maintaining 80-meter spacing and had not descended with the rest of the formation. Still at 600 meters, while 18 contacts were descending to 500. Different altitude, tighter spacing. Could be a GPS navigation variation. Could be something else. Impossible to confirm without an intercept. Keep an eye on the 2 holding altitude. Do not priority assign them yet. If they break formation, call it. At 9:32 a.m., the UAV contacts crossed into SM-6 AAW engagement range at 85 kilometers. SM-6 cells 4 and 5 fired against the 2 highest velocity contacts in the center of the formation at 83 kilometers. The contacts presenting the most acute angular approach and the cleanest track files. 2 launches, 1.2-second interval. Both intercepted. 18 contacts remaining. SM-6 cells, 6 and 7 against 2 more contacts at 80 kilometers. 1 intercept, 1 miss. The target executed a shallow dive to 200 meters that pushed the engagement geometry outside the SM-6's optimal terminal parameters. 17 contacts remaining. SM-6 cell 8, the last available AAW cell, against the surviving contact at 78 kilometers. Intercept. SM-6 inventory, 0. 16 UAV contacts remaining at 71 kilometers. The outer ring was empty. Running count, 9:33 a.m., second 972, SM-6 0. UAV, 16 live contacts at 68 kilometers. 2 altitude hold contacts at 69 kilometers. Decoy assessment pending. SM-2, 24, ESSM 32, RAM 21, CIWS 100%, cost $10.5 million. Time elapsed 16 minutes. The 2 contacts holding altitude had not moved. They were still at 600 meters, bearing 359 and 002, now at 69 kilometers. They had watched 4 SM-6 fire and had not altered course, speed, or altitude. That observation, no reactive maneuver to SM-6 engagement activity, was the data point the TAO had been waiting for. They were not evasion-equipped platforms. They were not ECM platforms. Platforms designed for electronic countermeasures or evasion maneuver would have responded to SM-6 engagement signatures. These had not, which left one functional explanation. They were decoys, radar reflector platforms with no warhead, designed to present an identical profile to the live Shahed-136 airframes around them and consume interceptors. The fire control system had been correct not to priority assign them. The TAO had been correct to watch them. But 4 SM-6 had already been allocated against other targets. The information came too late to recover those rounds. The assessment of which contacts were decoys required behavioral data that only became available after SM-6 was already expended. This was the second layer of the adversary's design. The ballistic missile had forced the BMD allocation, compressing the SM-6 AAW inventory. The decoys were now forcing engagement uncertainty into the SM-2 and ESSM layers. If the 2 decoy contacts absorbed 2 SM-2 rounds, those rounds were gone against platforms with no warhead. Flag the two altitude contacts as probable decoy profile. Do not engage with SM-2 or ESSM until they maneuver or their approach vectors put them inside CIWS range, where we confirm on FLIR. SM-2 on the other 16. Fire by track priority. Running count 9:33 a.m., second 978, SM-6 0, UAV 16 live contacts at 68 kilometers, plus 2 probable decoys at 69 kilometers held altitude. SM-2 24, ESSM 32, RAM 21, CIWS 100%. Decoy assessment unconfirmed. Cost $10.5 million. Time elapsed 16 minutes. SM-2 cells 1 through 8 against 8. Contacts at 35 to 40 kilometers. 6 intercepts, 2 misses. Both contacts executing descent maneuvers into the 100-meter altitude band, where sea clutter degraded track quality. 10 UAV contacts remaining in the live group at 31 to 34 kilometers, plus the 2 suspected decoys at 32 kilometers, now beginning their own descent from 600 meters. The altitude hold had ended. They were descending in profile identical to the live contacts. The altitude hold ending meant one of 2 things. The decoys were transitioning to terminal approach and would behave identically to the live platforms through the remaining engagement. Or they were live warhead platforms that had been holding altitude for a different reason entirely, and the TAO's decoy assessment was wrong. Reclassify the 2 altitude contacts. Treat as live threat. Engage with next SM-2 salvo. 2 SM-2 against the former altitude hold contacts at 29 kilometers. 1 intercept, 1 miss. The surviving contact continued closing at 27 kilometers. The weapons officer was managing 18 separate track files across the SM-2 engagement queue with a launch authorization cadence that had reached a decision every 3.1 seconds. His thumb on the authorization panel had built a rhythm that he was maintaining without conscious count. The numbers on the display told the story without narration. SM-2 cells expended, contacts remaining. The ratio between the 2 slowly resolving in the defense's favor, but not fast enough for comfort. ESSM cells 1 through 6 fired against 6 contacts at 18 to 22 kilometers, 5 intercepts, 1 miss. Running count 9:36 a.m., second 1,154, UAV 8 contacts, SM-6 0, SM-2 13 remaining, ESSM 26 remaining, RAM 21, CIWS 100%, ranges 14 to 19 kilometers, 2 sea skimming at 80 meters, track quality degraded, cost $20.7 million, time elapsed 19 minutes. ESSM cells 7 through 12 against 6 contacts at 14 to 17 kilometers. 4 intercepts, 2 misses, both sea skimming contacts below 80 meters, track quality degraded, ESSM detonating outside lethal radius on both. 2 contacts inside 12 kilometers. RAM cells 1 through 4 against 4 contacts at 8 to 11 kilometers. 3 intercepts, 1 miss, 3 contacts inside 7 kilometers. The CIWS was next. At 9:38 a.m., the SPY-6 operator called the contact that would define the final phase of the engagement. Sea skimmer, bearing 003, altitude 30 meters, speed 210 kilometers per hour, range 5.1 kilometers. Thermal signature elevated, possible payload variant. Elevated thermal signature, possible payload variant. The flyer operator confirmed it in 4 seconds. The contact on bearing 003 had a heat output approximately 30% above baseline, Shahed-136 profile. Not consistent with a standard 40-kilogram fragmentation warhead. consistent with a thermobaric warhead configuration or a significantly heavier fragmentation package. This was the contact that had been holding altitude earlier, the one the TAO had reclassified from suspected decoy to live threat, the one the SM-2 had missed. It had not been a decoy. It had been the primary payload, held at altitude during the SM-6 phase to avoid the highest quality engagement envelope, descending only when the SM-6 inventory was exhausted and the engagement ring had shifted to SM-2 and ESSM, where its approach angle was more survivable. The adversary had used the altitude hold not as a decoy behavior, but as a timing maneuver. Wait for the expensive interceptors to be consumed on the standard profile contacts. Descend into the middle ring when the outer ring is empty. It had worked. The contact was at 5.1 kilometers with an elevated thermal signature and 3 CIWS mounts as the remaining dedicated interceptors. 2 ram rounds against the elevated thermal contact at 4.8 kilometers. First, proximity detonation 8 meters from the contact. The warhead did not cook off. The airframe lost its right wing in the fragmentation pattern and entered an uncontrolled yaw but maintained forward velocity. The motor was still running. Second ram. Guidance section hit. Motor stopped. The airframe was no longer powered, but it was at 4.2 kilometers altitude, 35 meters above the water surface with forward velocity from inertia. It was not going to stop flying until it hit something. CIWS forward acquired at 3,800 meters. Not a powered platform anymore. A ballistic object at 35 meters altitude, speed decaying from 210 kilometers per hour as drag worked on the damaged airframe. Burst 0.7 seconds, 52 rounds. Contact fragmented at 3,500 meters. The warhead initiated in the fragmentation cloud, a detonation distinctly larger than a standard Shahed fragmentation event, a compressed pressure wave that reached the bridge 10.3 seconds later as a sharp physical concussion felt against the forward windows. A thermobaric signature, not a 40-kilogram fragmentation warhead. A fuel-air explosive package estimated at 60 to 80 kilograms equivalent yield. At 3,500 meters, the overpressure was below structural damage threshold. At 1,000 meters, it would not have been. Running count, 9:38 a.m., second 1,274. Elevated thermal contact, neutralized at 3,500 meters. 2 contacts remaining. SM-6, 0. SM-2, 11 remaining. ESSM, 21 remaining. RAM, 15. CIWS forward, 96%. CIWS aft, 97%. Cost, $24.6 million. Time elapsed, 21 minutes. The 2 remaining contacts were standard profile, Shahed-136 at 3.1 and 4.7 kilometers. CIWS forward took the closer contact at 2,800 meters. Burst 0.4 seconds, 30 rounds, contact fragment. Standard warhead initiated in the fragmentation cloud, pressure wave reaching the hull as a minor vibration. CIWS aft took the second at 4,300 meters. Burst 0.6 seconds, 44 rounds, contact fragmented, warhead initiated. The flash of the detonation visible from the bridge as a brief orange point above the horizon. At 9:39 a.m., the SPY-6 was tracking no inbound contacts within 30 kilometers. The engagement was over. Total duration from first ballistic missile detection to final UAV intercept, 22 minutes and 14 seconds. 2 separate threat categories. 1 ship, 1 fire control suite that had spent 11 seconds in a condition its designers had not specifically gamed out. Radar attention divided between a Mach 5 ballistic warhead section at low altitude and 20 UAV track files at long range, with a 9-second assessment window that had compressed a fire-assess-fire sequence into a geometry requiring a third interceptor. The damage assessment completed at 9:52 a.m. No hull impacts, no structural damage, no personnel injuries. The ship was fully operational in every system. The magazine assessment was read in CIC at 9:54 a.m. without ceremony, because the watch team had been tracking the numbers throughout, and the ceremony of reading them aloud added nothing to what they already knew. SM-6, 0 of 8. SM-2, 11 of 24. ESSM, 21 of 32. RAM, 15 of 21. CIWS forward, 92%. CIWS aft, 95%. The outer ring was completely expended. The ship was operating in the middle ring as the primary defensive layer. Against a second simultaneous ballistic plus UAV engagement in the next 4 days, the ship had 11 SM-2, 21 ESSM, and no outer ring. Against a Birkin 2H without SM-6 in BMD mode, the intercept options were SM-2, which was not rated for ballistic missile defense, and CIWS, which engaged at under 1.5 kilometers. Neither was a solution. The supply officer assembled the final accounting without being asked, because the supply officer had been doing it in parallel during the engagement, and the numbers were already compiled. Adversary cost: 1 Birkin 2H medium-range ballistic missile, estimated $150,000 to $300,000 in Iranian supplied component cost, plus Houthi modification. 20 Shahed-136 one-way attack UAVs at $20,000 each, $400,000. Launch vehicles and crews, $50,000 operational estimate. Total adversary investment, approximately $675,000. U.S. interceptors expended: 3 SM-6 BMD at $2.1 million to $6.3 million, 5 SM-6 AAW at $2.1 million to $10.5 million, 13 SM-2 at $1.2 million to $15.6 million, 11 ESSM at $450,000 to $4.95 million, 6 RAM at $900,000 to $5.4 million. CIWS ammunition, $11,000. Total, $42.8 million. Exchange ratio, 63-1 in the adversary's favor. The gunnery officer read the number and set his coffee down. Not from surprise, from recognition. The 63-1 ratio was consistent with every engagement in this theater for 11 months, ranging between 26-1 and 73-1 across 14 prior engagements. The adversary had found the range and stayed in it, sustaining an exchange ratio the U.S. defense budget could not support indefinitely. A $200,000 Birkin 2H had consumed 6 SM-6, forced BMD engagement mode that degraded UAV tracking, generated an 11-second assessment window in which a Mach 5 warhead section descended from 42 kilometers to 6 kilometers before the second round fired, and turned a manageable 20 UAV engagement into a dual-category problem that cost $42.8 million to resolve. The ballistic missile had not needed to hit the ship. It had needed to change the problem. It had done that precisely. Emergency resupply transmitted at 10:14 a.m. SM-6 priority. ETA, 4 days from nearest pre-positioned ammunition ship in the Arabian Sea. Birkin 2H reload from observed logistics, 36 hours. 20 Shahed-136 from assessed storage, 12 hours. The adversary could reconstruct the full engagement package in under 2 days. The ship's outer ring would not be restored in under 4. Engagement summary: Gulf of Aden, 9:17 a.m. to 9:39 a.m. local. Threat 1. Birkin 2H ballistic missile, intercepted via 3-round SM-6 BMD sequence. Warhead section neutralized at 31 kilometers range, 1.8 kilometers altitude. 0 hull impacts from ballistic threat. Threat 2, 20 Shahed-136 UAVs, 18 standard profile, 2 altitude hold timing variant, including 1 thermobaric warhead. All 20 neutralized. Thermobaric contact fragmented at 3,500 meters. Overpressure below structural threshold. Interceptors expended, SM-6 x 8, 0 remaining. SM-2 x 13, -11 remaining. ESSM x 11 to 21 remaining. RAM x 6, 15 remaining. CIWS combined 5% expended. Total adversary cost, approximately $675,000. Total U.S. munitions expenditure, $42.8 million. Exchange ratio, 63 to 1 in the adversary's favor. Magazine status, SM-60. SM-2 at 46%. Outer ring fully expended. Emergency resupply ETA, 4 days. Adversary re-engagement capability, 36 hours for ballistic reload, 12 hours for UAV package. The ballistic missile had cost $200,000. It had forced a 9-second radar decision window at Mach 5. It had consumed 6 SM-6. It had transformed a drone engagement into a dual-category problem. The ship was not designed to fight simultaneously. The Burkan had not needed to reach the hull. It needed to change the arithmetic. It had. For $200,000, it had changed the arithmetic of a $42.8 million defensive engagement in ways that would not appear on any battle damage assessment and would not generate a damage report. The ship was intact. The outer ring was not. The adversary had found the seam in a system designed to fight one war extremely well. They were not fighting that war. They were fighting the one beside it.